Okay, I guess we can go ahead and get started. Today, I want to do a few different things, but one of the things I want to make sure we do is that I touch base on any questions that people have about the paper that's due on Saturday. I've been receiving a lot of drafts and thesis statements and things like that in the email, and I've been trying to get back to people on that. My turnaround's usually less than 24 hours, but it kind of depends on if I get backed up. If everybody sends their stuff all in one afternoon, then it takes me a little while to clear that out. But I am getting back to you on those. So if you shared your paper with me and wanted some feedback, or you shared your thesis and wanted some feedback, then I'm working through those, and you should hear back from me today if you haven't already heard back from me, because I've been trying to clear those as I go through. So if you have questions, I want you to go ahead and go to this menti.com, because before we sign off today, I want to address anything that might be in your mind about the paper. If you want me to do like a little walkthrough on setting it up in MLA, like if you want me to do a little refresher, I can do that before we go. Like anything that you think would be helpful for the paper, you can put it there. Also, I was thinking about, this is anonymous, by the way, it's not going to put your name or anything. I was also thinking that maybe some people might want me to have a Zoom Thursday during this time or in the afternoon to like just do any other questions that might pop up as people are working on their drafts. So if you think that would be a good idea, you can just post that also and say, yeah, I think that that would be helpful. I don't want to set up a Zoom and nobody needs it or wants to come, but I definitely want to do it if y'all think that it would be handy for me to go over anything at that point. So kind of keep that open in another tab or in the background, and then that way, if something occurs to you while we're doing today's lesson, then you can pop it in there, and before the end, I'll go and address anything that's on that page. But this works pretty good on your phone too. It's just menti.com, and then there's a code there that you have to put in so that you can respond to that topic. So I just want to make sure, I mean, if we were in the classroom, then it'd be easy to just, raise hands and answer questions, but it's not as easy on this virtual situation. Welcome to my classroom. Before we went out in March, I took a picture of my classroom because I thought I would miss it. And I don't know. I know a lot of people didn't know that we were going to be out as long as we were, but I had a feeling. And so I told my students like the week before spring break, I said, you better borrow a Chromebook from me. I just have a feeling. And it turned out that I'm psychic. So I took a picture of my classroom just so that if I felt like I missed it, I could be back in my classroom again. I guess I could be back in my classroom, but I don't know, COVID's. All right. So if you're just joining us, then I'm just collecting questions, things about the paper that you might want me to touch on. I can do like a little how to set up your paper in MLA tutorial real quick. I could, answer questions that people have about, organization or things like that. I have been dealing with individual questions. So people have been sharing their papers with me. I've been giving feedback. Usually takes me less than 24 hours to do that. I'm not too backed up. I think there's 4 things for me to look at when I'm finished with my Zoom calls today, but I've been looking at thesis statements, giving feedback on partial drafts, whatever you might need. So you can post a question there. Let's go over to this week's unit, little module. Week 7. We're 15 weeks, so we're almost halfway. We'll give it that way. First week of poetry. So I think that you wrote a little bit for today about poetry. And we're going to work with the material from that book a little bit today and a little bit next week. But you should have read sort of the introductory material in the textbook about poetry. I want to do more of an interactive introduction to poetry in our class today. So I have some poems that I want to share with you. But first I have some updates. So let me go through those real quickly, and you can take note of anything that you might need to jot down. If you're just cuckoo. If you're just joining us, I do have a question slide going over here. So if there's something about the paper that you want me to address before we sign out today, then you can go to menti.com, or maybe just open it in case, because I'm not always going to be on that screen. Just open it and use this code. And then if something occurs to you, you can put a question and I'll address it. You can also put a chat or, unmute yourself, but I've found that most people don't like to do that. It's easier if I get all the questions here. Where was I? Oh yeah, content. So just a few updates. Number one, this is an A week, so is next week. They decided to you would think this would be a B week because last week was an A week, but it's not. It's an A week because we have another staff development on Monday. There's no classes this coming Monday, and so they're trying to balance out the number of A days and B days in the semester. And so they turned this week into an A week, which means you only have a formative on Tuesday and Thursday this week. Next week is also an A week, so same thing next week, and no classes on Monday. So, but I'll see you on Tuesday. So the 13th, I think it is. Yeah, on the 13th. Also, the counselors announced that they are starting to schedule TSI testing on campus. So if you need the TSI test, I don't know what your situation might be, but I just wanted to let you know that they are scheduling those tests. So if you need math, that's tomorrow and Thursday. And then next Wednesday, Thursday is reading. And then Wednesday, Thursday, the following week is math, reading, and writing. So if you know that you need any of those TSI tests, maybe the math class you're taking next year or next semester or whatever, you need to take the TSI, then those are the dates. Grades. So we started the second 6 weeks this week. So the grades for East got posted. I want to talk a little bit about grades because it's in the syllabus, but I know that we all read the syllabus at the beginning, or we don't read the syllabus in the beginning. But I want to point out a few things about grades. Number one, I don't want this to sound like I don't care, because I do, but I don't really watch your averages at East. This is a semester course, so I'm thinking about your whole semester average in terms of the STC grade. Whenever it is time for a progress report, I just upload whatever grade is in the East gradebook. Whenever it's time for a report card, I just upload whatever grade is in the gradebook. So it's not that I don't care, it's just that my mindset is toward the semester, not the 6 weeks. In case you didn't know, your transcript that eventually goes to your colleges and all that stuff only shows your semester averages. It does not show your 6 weeks. So in a way, I'm not worried about that. So if you're concerned about eligibility, if you're concerned about getting all A's, if you're considered, any of those personal goals that you have, obviously I want to dialogue with you about it. It's not like I don't care about your grades. It's just I'm not looking at your averages for East at the 6 weeks mark, because this is a semester long course. So if that does matter to you, then you should monitor your grades. If, a progress report, if something's going wrong with your grades, then it's not where you want it to be, like I want at least a B and I have a 76, then, communicate with me. What can I be doing so that by the end of the 6 weeks, I have the grade that I want? What doesn't happen with me is people finding out what their final grade is at the end of the 6 weeks and going, oh, I don't like that. That's not the way it works. The final grade is the final grade. I don't go back and change things. We don't do extra credit in this class. The only extra credit is really the summer stuff. I gave 3 extra credit assignments over the summer, 1 each month. And so that's going to be 3 points on the average for the people who did that, but that's done and over with. So it's just good to keep tabs on your grades and, you know, keep your goals in mind. And I want to help you reach your goals. But, you know, emailing me Monday afternoon after the grades went in, which I got a couple of emails, it's not gonna, nothing's gonna happen at that point in time. There's no space for us to go at that point. If like I said, if there's a progress report grade and you want to work on it, then that gives us 2 or 3 weeks to do whatever we have to do to improve your grade. So I think communication is good. I think, you know, kind of checking in on the grade books, the East one and the STC one, they're not always going to be the same. So the percentages are different. So even if the grades are the same, the overall grade might not be the same. I use that 60-40 for East, 60% for the daily grades and quizzes and 40% for the tests and major assessments. And then the STC has a different grade breakdown because of the papers. So, you know, just keep an eye on your grades. And if something is happening that you want to discuss with me, then, you know, we can do that. Last thing, reminder to seniors about your goals. The counselors are kind of expecting that by the end of October, you will have your Apply Texas and your FAFSA done. FAFSA opened Thursday. So if you're a senior, you probably want to be working on both of those things. I will definitely help you with your essay if you want help with it. I did a seminar and it's listed here where I have a bunch of little videos kind of giving you ideas and helping you through that process. So if you're writing the essay, you might want to do that. The essays on college applications are for more than just getting into the college. A lot of times I have kids who are like, well, I'm already in the top 10, I already know I'm getting in, but they use that a lot of times for scholarships. So I want to make sure that you get all the help that you need on those essays, seniors. FAFSA also just started, so you want to be filling that out. There is a financial aid night on the 20th. I think in the evening, they're going to do a Zoom call, the counselors, and help people with their FAFSA. So if you start your financial aid application and you run into trouble or you just need some help starting, you have to sign up for a PIN number and then you can, you know, use the PIN number to get into your account. Then they're going to help you on the 20th, I believe. Also, if just a note, if you are not signed up for your counselor's Google Classroom, they all have a Google Classroom by grade level. Do y'all know that? Yes? Yeah, so every one of your counselors is posting stuff in the Google Classroom. Also, there's one for the College and Career Center. And that's where they're posting stuff like, oh, UTRGV is doing, the rep is coming to this Zoom call. So if you're wanting to meet with reps from UTSA, UT, A&M, any of those, just to hear what they have to say about the school, or seniors, if you need vouchers to cover your application fees, it costs anywhere from $75 to $150 to submit your application to a college, in case you didn't know. So if you want to pay those, then that's fine. But if you don't want to pay those, you might qualify for a waiver and you would ask those reps. So what I'm getting at is that if you are not in the Google Classroom for the College and Career Center or your counselor, you're probably not getting information about all those things that are going on. So how can you get into those classrooms? If you go right here to the counselor's website, they went through this with all the seniors a couple weeks ago when they were starting Apply Texas. They have a lot of information on here, but you can request a transcript right here, but here's where you can get all of the counselors' Google Classroom codes. I will show you. So it depends on who your counselor is. You can see they have them organized by their phone numbers. They have a Google Voice so that they, you know, can respond to you on text. And then here are their codes by grade level. So you can just go to your counselor and you can sign into, you know, sign up for whatever classroom they have going on, and they'll update you on things. And then down here in the bottom left is the Google Classroom code for the College and Career Center. So that's where you'll get updates about testing dates, reps that are coming, They're still doing rep visits and all of that. They're just obviously doing it on Zoom. So it might be good for you to at least get those updates and find out what's going on. Whether you act on it or not, maybe you're not at the point where you need to meet with reps. Juniors, it's a little bit early, but maybe you want to start hearing about different schools and what they have to offer. So you can join that classroom code also. Just a little PSA for everybody today. But where I got that was from this link right here on the counseling webpage, and I put a link to the counseling webpage on this week's updates right here. So all that stuff's there to help you. I know that it says seniors, but juniors, it's kind of good for you to hear this so that you know what's going on next year. I teach a independent studies class for seniors who have already finished English 4. So some of you might choose to take that next year. And so in that class, I walk you through all this stuff. We practice the essay, we do resumes, we make it an assignment to do some of the things that seniors need to do, but it's kind of good to have it on your radar. Any questions about any of that stuff, counselor stuff? Before we get into the poetry. Okay, Tuesday then, this is all the stuff for today. This week, I wanted to make sure that you had time to finalize your paper, which is due on Saturday. So I didn't make a whole lot of assignments. I know it looks like a lot of things, but we're gonna look at all these things today here in class to open up poetry. But I did want to talk a little bit about the analytical paper. And if you click down here is where you're going to submit the paper on Saturday. I did post here, and I have been posting the assignment sheet and also the scoring rubric. And I wanted to talk about those a little bit today because we're getting closer to the final paper. So I put the assignment sheet here. Just a few things that I want to touch on. One is MLA formatting. So far, the papers that people have been sending me for feedback have been set up already in MLA. Now, when I say MLA formatting, I'm talking about margins, I'm talking about your heading, I'm talking about your header, I'm talking about that stuff. This is not a research paper, so you're not going to have really parenthetical references. You'll have a work cited, but the only thing you're citing is your story, because you shouldn't be using any outside quotations about the story. Everything you're putting in your paper is from your own interpretation of the story. So you have a work cited, but it's just that story. You don't need to put in anything else on the work cited. But I do want you to make sure that you follow the formatting rules for MLA. It's different than APA or any of the other ones. So make sure that your paper has a 1-inch margin. Pins here. Make sure that you double space the entire thing, including your heading. Make sure that you use some sort of, normal font. I don't usually have to tell people that, but usually people do that okay. The first page, there's no title page on MLA, so we just start with a page that looks like this. So in the header, which means you have to sort of double click on the Google Doc at the top, you're going to put your last name, space, and then insert page number. Don't just type 1, because then every page is page 1, right? Then goes your name. Next to that should be your A number, but I'm not going to take off points for that. You're submitting on Blackboard, so it's obvious who you are. Then you put my name there. Then you put the course, and it's ENGL 2341, and then you put the date. Notice that the date, I don't know, can you see that? Notice that the date is with the number first, and then the month, and then the year. Does it matter? Yeah, because it's not MLA if you don't do it that way. So I'm not that picky. I probably just, pass by it because the content of your paper is more important to me. But if you wanted to do things properly for MLA and be impressive, then you would do it that way. Notice also that there's a title here, so the title gets centered, but the rest of the paper is on the left margin. Sometimes people center the title and then they forget to to go back to the left margin for the rest of the paper. Make sure that you don't bold or quotation mark or anything on the title, unless you're using quotations on the title of your short story that you're using. So the first page should look like that. And then you can have sections if you want. I'm not requiring it for this paper, it's a short paper. So, and then after that, they start talking about how to do section headings and stuff like that. But that's for longer papers for navigation purposes. But as long as you're following those rules, then that's what I mean by MLA format right here. When we do our second paper, that's a research paper, and the issue comes up there with citations and making sure that your works cited page is set up properly according to MLA, you know, documentation, and that's a little more involved. What else? Just a reminder that these papers are worth 40% of the final grade. This and the other paper together will be 40% of your semester average for STC. For East, it's just going to count as a major assessment in the second 6 weeks because the grades are set up differently at each school. Let me go through the rubric with you just briefly. There's a link here. There's also a link on the assignment in Blackboard. So this is pretty basic, but this is what I'm looking for. So if you are working on a second draft or, you know, third draft, and it's probably time to compare your paper to this rubric and, you know, figure out where you are on formatting, organization, grammar, thesis, and support. Those are the main 4 areas that I'm looking for with this paper. And kind of see where are you with these items. So this is basically what I look at when I'm giving feedback on the essays that people share with me leading up until the final draft. So I'll usually comment on these 4 things. Just a reminder, I'm not going to be proofreading for you. You can use Grammarly for that. I might point out, you know, when I give you feedback, I might say, you've got a lot of comma errors, or you should vary your sentence length, or, you know, like whatever issue might be going on there for grammar. But I'm not going to do it for you on your paper. So I might suggest it to you, and then it's your job to go in and figure it out. Now, if you want to sit down and go through it and like learn those comma rules, then we can set up a Zoom meeting and I'll sit with you. It's not like I don't want to teach you that, but most students don't have trouble with those things. Or if we do have trouble with it, like your issue isn't the same as other people's issues. So I don't do lessons on grammar really in class for everybody for that reason. So, you know, everybody has their little issue. For me, it's I before E except after C. I just always, since I was a child, mix that up. And so I always have to watch that when I'm spelling those words. Everybody has something. But you don't want any more than 10 errors would really bring your paper down. And I will count them. So like after the first 10, it automatically can't be an A. So just, you know, proofread. Your communication is important. You want your ideas to come across, not your mistakes. So it's a final draft, so double check all those things. If you're not sure about a specific instance, then, you know, run it through Grammarly or something like that, spell checker, or, you know, email me and I'll tell you the correct grammatical way to say something. And then thesis and support. I would say that this is the most important thing. So if you're looking at your paper, the thesis and support is probably the heaviest weight for the grade. That's the thing I look at most comprehensively on the paper. So, you know, the organization, the grammar, and the formatting are important for clear communication. But if you don't have an idea that's coherently stated, or if the idea is not supported in the paper, it can't be a successful paper. So I know it looks like all 4 of these things are equal, but really this bottom one is the most important thing. These things can contribute to an excellent paper or a problematic paper. But ultimately, if this bottom thing is strong, then it's probably going to be a passing paper unless these other things are so horrible that, you know, I can't even comprehend it. Any questions on the rubric? On the scoring guide, what I'm looking for? sometimes people submit their papers to me and they're like, hey, I just want to know about my organization. Like, I'm not sure where I am on the scoring guide. Can you give me some feedback? And I'll say, well, I think you're at a, meets expectations right now. Here's what you could do to bring it into the exceeds expectations. Here are my suggestions. So sometimes people benefit from that. Any questions over here? Nope. Okay, if you do have questions and you don't want to unmute yourself, maybe you have that sleepy morning voice, you can go and post them over here on menti.com with this code. All right, I think I talked about the paper sufficiently. I can talk about organization if you want me to. I'm just going to close all these. But most people should have a pretty good sense of their essay and the structure at this point. Maybe you're just doing final touches, you're going in and, clarifying some things, adding examples, rephrasing items that, could be clearer, that sort of thing. One thing I do not recommend doing is going through, like sometimes people think the last stage of writing their essay is going in and changing a whole bunch of words using their thesaurus. Don't do that. That usually makes the paper incomprehensible if you do that too much. I mean, a couple places, all right, like you want to change the word good to something else, but sometimes people go overboard with that and all of a sudden they think they're using fancy words, but they're using words that have a context and they're just not appropriate for the context. And so just try to be clear using the vocabulary that you have. And in a few places, if you want to look up a more vivid word, then that's fine. All right, I don't see any questions about papers, so I'm going to move on. Last week, you all submitted an infographic to wrap up our study of short fiction. And I was looking at them and I was super happy to see the results of those. I want you to click on that and go to the page where people posted all of their infographics. I'm hoping that this was a more fun way to wrap up a unit of study because, I mean, we could have done a worksheet or anything like that, but this gives you a little more creative freedom and a little bit more dynamic way to present your ability to analyze for these elements. I want you to go to this site right now. I made the link on here, right here. I want you to go to that on your computer and I want you to take a few minutes. I'm gonna give you about, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes to look through some of the other ones that people did. You can click on them. First of all, make sure that your name is on it. If your name isn't on it, then go back in there and put your name. Maybe your name is on the infographic, that's a possibility. So some people didn't put their name. I already have them. You should have uploaded it also on Blackboard. So I have your name, but go ahead and put that stuff in also. Just take a look at some of them. And I enabled comments and hearts. So if you see one that you think is especially cool, I want you to go ahead and put a heart, give people some support here in class. And especially look at the ones for stories that you didn't, like the other stories that you didn't do, and see how people did them. I'm gonna give you a couple, I'm gonna mute myself and give you all a couple minutes to look through what people did. All right, take a second and finish up the one that you're looking at. I like seeing that you're adding the little hearts. I think that encourages your classmates. It's kind of interesting to see what each person decided to do for their graphics and all that stuff. All right, let's head back over to the Blackboard list for today. I'd like to spend the remaining of our class time talking about poetry, because this week marks the beginning of our poetry study. And I think that the best way to begin talking about poetry is to talk about the basic qualities of poetry and the way that poetry is different from other types of literature. So I'm going to do that with some examples today. And these examples are kind of serving as an introduction, but also a way to look at some poetry, so I don't have to assign you a lot of poetry between now and next week. I want you to spend your time on your paper. So the ones that we're going through today are a way for me to kind of like front end our and jumpstart our discussion of poetry, and also to kind of cover some stuff that I would have assigned for you to read and look at over the next week or so. There is a small assignment to do for next Tuesday, but I didn't want to make a lot of reading or anything like that to take away from your paper. So if you look right here, this is where you might want to take some notes down. I don't know. You probably already have some notes from the textbook, because I assigned a few sections last week about poetry as a way to start getting you thinking about the terminology that we use when we're talking about poetry. I think that there are four main elements to poetry that separate it from other genres of literature. And I've listed them here with some examples. One is that poetry has intense emotion. Now, I'm not saying that a novel or a short story can't have intense emotion. It's just that a poem seems more intense because it's shorter. So the idea is that a poem can have sort of like a concentrated emotion in it because it's so much shorter than a novel. A novel might really get you at the end or at certain key moments, but it's 300 pages long. So there's, you know, sort of like some downtime. In a poem, usually there is intense emotion sort of throughout. It's like a burst. So I decided to talk about that using spoken word poetry. Spoken word poetry is a new form of poetry that's only been around for maybe, you know, the last half of the 20th century. And spoken word poetry is something that I think is a good example of intense emotion because it's meant to be performed. Spoken word poetry, there are sometimes contests for spoken word poetry called slam poetry contests. And the poets design the poems specifically not to be published, but instead to be performed. So that adds to the intensity, right? Because if somebody's performing in front of you, then their poem, then it's an immediate sort of visceral, emotional moment happening right in front of you. So I chose a few examples of spoken word poetry that I wanted to share with you today. As an example of that quality that we see in poetry of intense emotion. So the first one I want to share, obviously, I didn't invite any spoken word poets into my dining room today, or my classroom, but I do have some videos. So the only thing is I have to turn off my AirPod. Hold on. Videos. Okay. All right, so I have three. For sure I want to do these two. The third one is a little bit longer, but we'll do these two. And then so I want you to look for that intense emotion in these performances.
The first time I saw her, everything in my head went quiet. All the ticks all the constantly refreshing images just disappear. When you have obsessive compulsive disorder, you don't really get quiet moments. Even in bed, I'm thinking, they're locked door yet, the washman's yet, locked door yet, the washman's yet. When I saw her, the only thing I could think about was the hairpin curve of her lips, or the eyelash on her cheek, the eyelash on her cheek, the eyelash on her cheek. I knew I had to talk to her. I asked her about 6 times in 30 seconds. She said yes after the third one, but none of them felt right, so I had to keep going. On our first date, I spent more time organizing my meal by color than I did eating, fucking talking to her. But she loved it. She loved that I had to kiss her goodbye 16 times or 24 times if it was Wednesday. She loved it took me forever to walk home because there are lots of cracks on our sidewalk. When we moved in together, she said she felt safe, like no one would ever rob us because I definitely locked the door 18 times. I don't want to touch her mouth when she talked, when she talked, when she talked, when she talked, when she talked. When she said she loved me, her mouth would curl up. At night, she'd lay in bed and watch me turn all the lights off, on and off, and 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 on and off. She'd close her eyes and imagine the days and nights were just passing in front of me. Some mornings, I'd start kissing her goodbye, but she'd just leave because I was making her late for work. When I stopped at a crack in the sidewalk, she just kept walking. When she said she loved me, her mouth was a straight line. She told me I was taking up too much of her time. Last week, she started sleeping at her mother's place. She told me that she shouldn't have let me get so attached to her, that this whole thing was a mistake. But how can it be a mistake that I don't have to wash my hands after I touch her? Oh, it's not a mistake. It's one away from this, and I just can't. I can't go out and find someone new because I always think of her. Usually, when I obsess over things, I see germs sneaking into my skin. I see myself crushed by an endless succession of cards, and she was the first beautiful thing I ever got stuck on. I want to wake up every morning thinking about the way she holds her steering wheel, how she turns shower knobs when she's opening a safe, how she blows out candles, 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 blows out. Now, I just think about who else is kissing her. I can't breathe because he only kisses her once. He doesn't care if it's perfect. I want him back so bad. I leave the door unlocked. I leave the lights on.
Okay, so obviously you can see the intense emotion in that example. I think that we can find that intense emotion in all poems. I just think that it's especially poignant and obvious in spoken word poetry because of the performance, right? The person who wrote it is performing it, and they wrote it to be performed. So you can even hear the audience interacting. And so there's that emotion from the presenter, the poet, and also that emotion from the audience kind of coming together in almost a reader response kind of way, right? Immediately right in that environment. So you all can hear it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure, I guess. I wanted to stop it, but then he was on a roll, so I didn't. Okay.
Crazy.
Yeah, did you all like it, though?
Yeah, at first I didn't understand it, but then like towards the end I was like, oh, it makes sense. I get it.
A lot of spoken word poetry is like from the poet's own life experience or from their like political viewpoint. A lot of stuff is really edgy or sort of controversial, political, things like that. You know, people expressing their opinions on topics that are provocative. So I encourage you to look at more. If that interested you, then you can look at some more spoken word poetry. Also the links here. So if you enjoyed it, but it was the first time that you heard it and maybe there's some parts that you didn't get, then you can go back and watch it. That's my favorite one. Another one that I want to share with you is this one by Sarah Lawson, which is called Anne Frank Offers Justin Bieber a Lesson in Humility. Y'all know Anne Frank was a young woman who during the Holocaust was sort of hiding away in an attic for, 2 years almost, to hide from the Nazis. And, maybe when you were in middle school or something, you read The Diary of Anne Frank or a segment of it or something. And you can go to the house where she and her family and some others hid, and it's a museum now. So Sarah Lawson did a spoken word poem about Justin Bieber's reaction when I don't have to explain who Justin Bieber is, probably. Justin Bieber went to that museum and had a certain reaction. And so I give you, Anne Frank offers Justin Bieber a lesson in humility. Different topic. See if you can also find a different emotion, but it's still intense because of that spoken word quality. So let me play this one for you.
In April 2013, pop singer Justin Bieber visited the home of Anne Frank. In the guest book, he wrote, "She was a really great girl. I hope she would have been a belieber." Anne Frank offers Justin Bieber a lesson in humility. If there is a God worth praying to that lives in someone's skin, I have already found her inside of me. Don't need your wind-up toy to pray to. I am the girl inside the music box, the only ballerina who pulled a dance from her own captivity and painted the walls with it. Justin, don't enter my home and demand it care about your music. I've already plucked a tune from the gaping wounds in each crack in the paint here, sang a lullaby to the sound of the boots pacing outside. One night before bed, I gathered all the air inside my lungs. When I woke up still breathing, I named this moment my symphony. So great girl might be legacy enough for you. Nobody wanted this girl sitting next to them in school. Nobody wanted to write about what it's like to become girl. Nobody wanted to keep me quiet in their cupboards. Nobody wanted my hands to hold their children's hands. But now everybody wants a piece of my bones.
Thoughts?
Honestly, I don't know.
I'm still trying to figure out how she made those connections
The connections?
from a popular celebrity as Justin Bieber to a girl like Anne Frank.
Yeah, because Justin Bieber went to the home where she hid. And in the guest book, where you can sign in that you were there, he wrote, "She was a great girl. I would like to think that she would have been a believer," like one of his fans. So basically what he did was he turned the shrine of her sacrifice and her terror into his own self-interest. And it's kind of like a contrast between people that are roughly the same age, right? Anne Frank was a teenager when she was hiding in that attic, and I think at the time that Justin went there, he was, younger, obviously, than he is now. And so it's a contrast between those two worlds that are completely opposite. And she's kind of, Sarah Lawson's kind of like angry about that, because she thinks that going to a place of historic reverence and making it about yourself and your own persona and public interest as an entertainer is, desecrating the memory of somebody who suffered. And so it's kind of like a reality check, right? It's like a, hey, wait a minute, morality check into the idea that, there are people who truly suffered, and to go to the location of their suffering and turn it into a opportunity for you to promote your own self-interest is really distasteful. And so the lesson in humility is the idea that, maybe he should have been a little more humble and respectful at that location. And just, you could just sign his name, or, he could put something more poignant.
But, you know, at the same time, it's about youth, right? They're both young. And sometimes we do things in youth that we don't really think about, we don't really take the consideration for. And, you know, so maybe that's part of growing up. Justin Bieber kind of had to do that. I don't know. It's been an interesting rocky life for Justin Bieber, but probably Anne Frank is a more poignant example of, you know, what youth can offer us, if that makes sense. But I think that you can see in her expression, and, you know, Sarah Lawson, the way that she presents that is with some just under the surface anger about what happened and how Justin Bieber wrote in the guest book at Anne Frank's house. So the intense emotion that's portrayed is almost disdain, right, for that attitude. Does that make sense? Yeah, the thing about spoken word poetry is to really get it and on a deep level, you kind of have to watch it a couple times, which goes against the idea of spoken word poetry because it's in the moment. If you're in the audience live with the poet, you don't get to rewind and replay and, you know, go back over that and wait, I didn't hear that. It's a live moment. So in that way, it's special. On video, we can go back and watch it and go, oh, I didn't catch that. Or, you know, like, oh, the second time I watch it, I can get like a metaphor that she presented. We don't have it on paper like we do when we're analyzing a poem, you know, that's sort of static on the page. So that's one of the intense qualities of it too. So spoken word poetry, if you haven't really looked into it too much, is super interesting. I think somebody was telling me that the guy who won, one of those, what's that contest show? America's Got Talent, or one of those, was a spoken word poet just recently. So you can look into that. I have another one on here that I'm not going to have time to play for you. It's a little bit longer, but this one is about bullying to this day. So you can see that they're about issues, politics, views, you know, important perspectives. And I just wanted to play those to explain that poetry has intense emotion. If you get a chance, you could watch this other one. Poetry also has compacted and layered ideas. It's an idea that is, you know, sort of simmered down to its least common denominator, to its basic elements. Because I don't have 30 pages like a short story or 300 pages like a novel to get my idea across. So we have a lot of compacted and layered ideas in poetry, and that's different from other types. The poem that I'd like to use to demonstrate that is one of my very favorites from Emily Dickinson, and I'll read it for you. I linked it here. This poem is about snow, but the poem never uses the word snow. Excuse me. Instead, Emily Dickinson, who was an American poet, it describes snow. And so the idea here is to look for that compacted idea about snow and how we can get from just a few words a huge range of ideas about one simple thing like snow. Emily Dickinson didn't title her poems, so they just use the first line usually as the title of her poem. It sifts from leaden sieves, it powders all the wood, it fills with alabaster wool the wrinkles of the road. It makes an even face of mountain and of plain, unbroken forehead from the east unto the east again. It reaches to the fence, it wraps it rail by rail till it is lost in fleeces. It deals celestial veil to stump and stack and stem, a summer's empty room, acres of joints where harvests were, recordless, but for them. It ruffles wrists of posts as ankles of a queen, then stills its artisans like ghosts, denying they have been. So what I want you to notice here is that the idea of snow in just 20 lines is expanded exponentially because she's dealing with so many different aspects of snow. And the way that the poem is compacted would make it so that if we were really going to work with this poem, we would have to unpack what she's saying in all these lines to understand what she's trying to say about snow, because she's, you know, got a lot of different ideas that are sort of pressed together into this concentrated poem. Hopefully you can see that, because that's my example of compacted and layered ideas. Now, if you read it again, more will be revealed to you. Maybe there's some vocab that you would need to look up if you were actually studying that poem. Actually, the assignment that you have this week is the video that I made goes over that poem, so you already have an introduction to it. The third quality of poetry that I think is significant to make it unique from other forms of poetry is the beauty of the language. The fact that poetry has a musicality and a beautiful sound to it. And we can hear that in spoken word poetry. We can hear it in word choice. It sifts from leaden sieves, sounds like snow because of all the S's that are slowly sort of filtering through that poem. Snow does make a noise, by the way. It's just very, very subtle. So beauty of the language is important too. And the example that I want to share with you for that one is Sonnet 17 by Pablo Neruda. This is a translation. Neruda wrote in Spanish. So I do have it in Spanish on the second slide. Maybe somebody wants to read it in Spanish. I don't know if anybody feels bold this morning. But this is the translated version. So the thing to look for here is the beauty of the language. I don't love you as if you were a rose of salt, topaz, or arrow of carnations that propagate fire. I love you as one loves certain obscure things, secretly, between the shadow and the soul. I love you as the plant that doesn't bloom but carries the light of those flowers, hidden within itself. And thanks to your love, the tight aroma that arose from the earth lives dimly in my body. I love you without knowing how or when or from where. I love you directly without problems or pride. I love you like this because I don't know any other way to love, except in this form in which I am not, nor are you. So close that your hand upon my chest is mine, so close that your eyes close with my dreams. So you can hear the cadence of that, the softness of it, the urgency of it, and the beauty of the words put together in the lines. Can you hear that in Snow? Yes. Can you hear that in the spoken word poetry? Yes. Can we see the intense emotions in this poem? Yes. So all these poems kind of have all these qualities, but this one especially I think is good for looking at the way the words sound and the way that they're placed in phrases so that there's a repetition and an urgency in the way that you have to read it. Does anybody want to read it in Spanish? For us? No. Too early in the morning?
I don't know Spanish.
You don't know Spanish? Yeah, a lot of people don't. But the reason I put that on there is because the poet wrote originally, this poem is written in Spanish. When we talk about the beauty of the language, we don't mean only English, right? Like poets write in all the languages. So if you want to, I don't think I have time to do it right now, but if you want to, you can go, I put a link here where you can hear somebody reading it in the original language that it was written in. The beauty of the language is important to note. Close some of these tabs here. Okay. The last thing that I think, the fourth element of poetry that I think is important because it is heightened in our study of poetry more than other genres, is poignant meaning. In a short piece, we can gain a lot of meaning. Something that it might take a novel, 250 pages to get across, we can see in just a few lines of poetry. And the example that I have for that is a poem called Digging by Seamus Heaney. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean, rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father, digging. I look down till his straining rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. The coarse boot nestled on the lug, the shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. By God, the old man could handle a spade, just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Toner's bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up to drink it, then fell to right away, nicking and slicing neatly, heaving sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf. Digging. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head. But I've no spade to follow men like him, like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it. So the poignant moment comes in this poem at the very end, as the speaker is reflecting on the digging that his father did as a potato farmer, the digging that his grandfather did as a sod farmer. He doesn't have those jobs. Instead, he's a writer. And so he's thinking about digging in a different way, and the way that poetry and writing can dig into the human experience. So the poignant idea here is that there are all different kinds of digging, but there's also like a sort of generational element to this poem, the idea that he wants to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors, just maybe in a different way. So all of those are just examples to show these 4 different qualities. Any comments on those? I think if you want to go back and look at them, obviously poetry, because it has these qualities, bears rereading and looking deeply into it, which we will do plenty with poems and assignments and things like that. But for the introduction, I feel like just sitting here and going in depth and analyzing a poem isn't the most interesting way to start a unit on poetry. So hopefully these poems have sort of piqued your interest and made you think about, I forgot to put my AirPods back.
A little bit about the different qualities of poetry as we start looking at it. All right, wrapping up for today then. I can see we're almost out of time. Just a reminder that there's a formative on Thursday. I do respond to them. I read them and grade them and often put comments. So when you sign into formative, there will be a little notification up there if you want to see feedback that I've given you on your formatives. A lot of times if I'm asking you about your paper or something like that, then I do that. Reminder that the paper's due. I don't think anybody's going to forget that. I've said it enough times. The assignment for next week is short because I think between now and Saturday you're working mainly on the paper. But I do want to teach you how to do a special kind of analysis on poetry because we're going to use that 1, 2, 3 analysis with our study of poetry. So I made a video. It's sort of a step-by-step going through the poem It Sifts from Leaden Sieves, the one that I just read about snow. So the video's here. I think it's, I don't know, 25 minutes. But I'm going to teach you in that video how to do a 1, 2, 3 analysis. And then later on when I say do a 1, 2, 3 analysis, that's the procedure that you do. And then instead of reading all 4 of these poems, I just want you to choose one. They're all about poetry. So a couple of them are on PDF and a couple are from the book, so you can make your choice of whichever one you'd like to do. But I want you to practice one of those 1, 2, 3 analysis procedures on one of these poems for Tuesday next week. All right. And that's it. I'm not assigning anything out of the book. We'll do that stuff next week. I want to make sure that you have enough time to focus on the paper and learn to do that 1, 2, 3 analysis through that tutorial. All right, let me go over to the page and see if there are any no questions about the paper. Okay. Well, if something comes up, then go ahead and shoot me an email, or, you can see that I have my Google Voice open all the time up here so that people can respond that way also. And I look forward to reading your final drafts. Any final comments or questions for anything this week? No?
Oh, this cat is so dirty. What is wrong with you? Did you get beat up?
What is that?
What happened? Hey.
Somebody,
Know that
somebody's
they're
unmuted.
unmuted.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the end of today anyway. So I hope you all have a good week. Contact me if you have questions. I'm looking forward to reading your papers. So I'll see you next Tuesday.